Okay, so you want to build an artificial island. Find a stretch of open water, spray enough sand into it, protect the edges, draw roads across the top, and sell the new waterfront for more than the whole thing cost. From the air, it looks almost unfair. Water becomes land. Land becomes villas, hotels, beaches, and a new address that did not exist before. But there are two very different pictures hiding inside that idea. In one, the island fills with homes, guests, traffic, restaurants, and lights. In the other, the sand is already there, the outline is already visible. And the economy that was supposed to arrive on top of it does not show up on schedule. Palm Jumeirah and the World Islands sit off the same city. Both required reclamation. Both turned water into land. One became a connected district. Large parts of the other spent years waiting for capital, access, utilities, and development to catch up. So the real question is not whether you can build an island. Engineers can do that. The question is, what has to keep moving after the island appears for the project to become worth what it cost? And the first thing you need is not sand. It is authority. Open water looks empty, but it is not legally blank. You cannot sail out with a dredger, choose a patch of sea, and start manufacturing property. Someone has to define the site. Someone has to approve the change to the coastline. Someone has to decide what may be built there, how the project connects to the city, which environmental obligations apply, and what kind of property rights can eventually be sold. That is why a project like Palm Jumeirah needs a master developer. Nikhil was not simply building one hotel or one row of homes. It was coordinating a district that did not exist yet. The marine site, the overall shape, the roads, the utility corridors, the plots, the common areas, the access points, and the sequence in which all of those pieces would arrive. This matters because the island may look like one asset from the air, but it is not controlled by one person in one simple way. A buyer can own a qualifying freehold property, a hotel company can operate a resort, a utility provider can control part of the power or water system. Public authorities remain responsible for other systems. The master developer can sell individual plots, while still carrying obligations tied to access, infrastructure, and the wider district. The person who buys a villa does not own the sea around it. The hotel operator does not control the causeway. The developer does not become independent of the city just because the shoreline moved. Before the first grain of sand is placed, the project is already a negotiation over who may build, who may sell, who must connect, and who remains responsible when something stops working. Then the dredgers arrive, and the negotiation becomes a supply chain. According to Royal IHC, Palm Jumeirah required roughly 110 million cubic meters of sand. The outer breakwater required roughly 9 million tons of rock, brought from 16 quarries in the United Arab Emirates. Those figures sound impressive. What matters is what they force you to do. The island site now reaches far beyond the water where the palm will appear. Rock has to be blasted, cut, loaded, transported, and placed. Dredging vessels lift material from the seabed. Survey crews check position and depth. Barges move, fuel moves, crews rotate, equipment breaks and has to be repaired while the project continues spending money every day. One of the most visible placement methods is called rainbowing. A dredger sprays a mixture of sand and water in a huge arc toward the reclamation area. On camera, it looks like land being painted into the sea. For the developer, it is money being converted into unfinished ground. Because the spray is not property, it is placement. The material still has to reach the right elevation. The shape has to stay within the plan. Surveyors have to keep correcting what cannot be judged by eye, and the new fill has to be prepared for the loads that will eventually sit on top of it. That is where the first irreversible problem appears. Freshly placed sand can be loose. It can settle. Roads, utility lines, and expensive buildings cannot be treated as though they are sitting on natural ground that has been there for centuries. One method used on reclaimed land is vibrocompaction, where equipment penetrates the fill and helps densify it. The term sounds technical. The financial meaning is simple. By now you have paid for authority, planning, vessels, crews, fuel, sand movement, rock movement, surveying, and placement. The island may already be visible in satellite images. Buyers may already be looking at renderings. And you still may not have land ready to support the buildings that are supposed to pay you back. This is the first thing the public image hides. Artificial islands become famous in the period when they are least economically complete. The outline appears early, the usable district arrives much later. A buyer looking at a waterfront villa plan sees a beach, a driveway, and a view. The developer sees compacted ground, settlement risk, utility routes, access deadlines, and years of obligations that have to be met before the buyer receives anything usable. And while the ground is being prepared, The sea does not wait. The island has not escaped the water by rising above it. Waves still carry energy toward every exposed edge. Currents move sediment. Storms test weak points. The same water that creates the premium view is also the force most capable of wearing the project down. Palm Jumeirah is protected by a crescent-shaped outer breakwater approximately 11 kilometers long. Its job is to reduce the energy of incoming waves before they reach the trunk and fronds. That sounds like a finished solution. Build the barrier, protect the land, move on, except the barrier changes the water inside it. A nearly enclosed ring can restrict circulation, so the breakwater includes two large openings, each described at roughly 150 meters, intended to improve water exchange. The official account says the design was meant to refresh the enclosed water roughly every 2 weeks. Now the project has two competing jobs. It has to block enough wave energy to protect the investment while allowing enough exchange to avoid creating a poorly circulating basin. There is another cost sitting underneath that balance. Reclamation can bury seabed habitat, increase turbidity during construction, and alter currents and sediment movement. The exact effects depend on the site and the way the work is carried out, so this is not a claim that every artificial island causes the same damage or that every mitigation effort fails. It is a reminder that environmental review and monitoring are part of the project because changing the coastline changes a living system, not an empty sheet of blue on a map. That matters economically even before it becomes a public controversy. Surveys take time, mitigation costs money. A change in current can affect beaches or water conditions that the development is selling as part of its value. The project cannot honestly treat the sea as both the source of its premium and an external problem someone else will manage. That is the pattern that keeps returning through the entire island. Every solution becomes another system. The breakwater protects the shore, but it also has to be inspected and maintained. The openings improve circulation, but water conditions still have to be monitored. More shoreline creates more valuable views, but it also creates more edge exposed to marine forces. The project does not eliminate the sea, it turns the sea into a permanent operating expense, and the expense continues after the construction crews leave. The rocks keep absorbing wave energy. Beaches may still need profiling or nourishment. Drainage still has to work. Marine structures still need attention. The island never stops being a coastal project. It simply becomes a coastal project with people and property sitting on top of it. At this point, the land may be authorized, visible, compacted, and protected. That still does not make it useful. Now the developer has to build everything the aerial photograph cannot show. Take one future villa at the end of a frond. The buyer is paying for privacy and water, but before the buyer can spend one night there, an electrical cable has to reach the house. Drinking water has to arrive. Sewage has to leave. A road has to carry construction crews, furniture, food, maintenance workers, and emergency vehicles. Telecommunications have to work. Drainage has to work. The route back to the mainland has to work at the same time as every other plot begins doing the same thing. The famous part is the coastline. The expensive part is often what runs underneath it. WSP's description of work associated with Palm Jumeirah includes roads, marine structures, utilities, power, water, bridges, and tunnels. The Palm monorail later added a transport system approximately 5.5 kilometers long. None of those systems creates the palm shape. Every one of them determines whether the shape can support a functioning district, and this is where the project begins making commitments it cannot easily reverse. A developer can delay one building, it cannot casually remove half a utility network after the roads and plots have been designed around it. It can change finishes. It cannot move the island closer to shore because the access route became expensive. Once the shape is formed, many future costs are physically embedded into that shape. Imagine the first morning after that villa is handed over. The owner turns on a tap. Somewhere behind the wall, that simple action depends on treatment, pumping, pipes, pressure, and a connection running back through the island. A delivery truck crosses the trunk with food. A maintenance worker follows the same road. A hotel employee, a security team, a cleaner, and an emergency vehicle all depend on access that has to work before sunrise and after midnight. None of those movements appears in the property photograph. All of them are part of what the buyer paid for. This is where the project becomes personal. The buyer does not care that the marine contract was completed on time if the road outside the house is not ready. The hotel operator does not care that the island outline is famous if staff, guests, food, laundry, and replacement parts cannot move reliably. The utility provider cannot treat one broken connection as an isolated inconvenience when hundreds of expensive properties depend on the same corridor. A luxury address can be created by the view. It is preserved by ordinary systems performing boring jobs every day. And distance matters. A compact development can keep many of those systems close together. A long narrow branch pushes them farther out. The road runs farther, the pipe runs farther, the cable runs farther, the emergency route runs farther. Every additional meter of prestige can carry another meter of obligation underneath it. This is why there is no single cost called the island. There is a marine works cost, a ground preparation cost, a breakwater cost, an access cost, a power cost, a water and sewage cost, a road cost, a building cost, a financing cost, and then, after all of those, a maintenance cost. And then, after all of those, a maintenance cost. Palm Jebel Ali, a separate current development in Dubai, shows how the bills arrive in layers. In 2024, Dubai Holding announced an 810 million dirham contract covering dredging, reclamation, beach profiling, and sand placement. It later announced 270 million dirhams for 2 electrical substations. In 2025, it announced more than 750 million dirhams in infrastructure contracts involving roads, utility connections, power distribution, and telecommunications. It also announced more than 5 billion dirhams in contracts for hundreds of villas on 6 fronts. Those figures are separate contract packages. They are not a complete project cost, and they should not be added together and treated like one. But the order tells you what building an island really means. The marine platform gets one contract, the power system gets another, roads and utilities get another, the homes get another, and after all of them are completed, the operating systems still need money. This is the point where a project can look wealthy and feel cash-starved at the same time. The renderings are beautiful, the properties may attract buyers, the island may become famous enough to create demand before it is finished, but the developer is paying for systems now, while much of the value arrives later. Off-plan sales can help bridge that gap. A buyer commits before the property is completed. The payment can support construction and show lenders that demand exists. It also turns the buyer into a deadline. The buyer is no longer admiring a map. The buyer is waiting for a road, a title, a utility connection, a handover, and a home that can actually be occupied. A reservation is useful. Collected cash is better, but neither one means the district is finished. A sold plot can still be inaccessible. A completed home can still sit beside unfinished infrastructure. An occupied property can still depend on a district carrying costs that have not yet been recovered. This is also why a sold-out announcement can be more comforting than conclusive. It can show that buyers like the concept and that the developer has found a market. It does not by itself show how much cash has been collected, whether every buyer will complete, whether the infrastructure will arrive on schedule, or whether the district will remain valuable after handover. Demand can be real and the timing can still break the project. And if the market weakens during that gap, the physical project cannot shrink as quickly as the demand. The breakwater is already there. The fronts are already there. The utility corridors may already be committed. The developer cannot shorten every road because financing became more expensive. It cannot delete a section of coastline because buyers became cautious. Now put those obligations on a calendar. The marine contractor wants to be paid while the land is being formed. The electrical contractor is paid before most residents use the power. Roads and pipes have to be built before property owners can depend on them. Buyers may pay in stages, lenders may release money under conditions, and future hotels may not open for years. The project is therefore carrying 2 clocks. The construction clock measures what must be paid next. The demand clock measures when buyers, residents, and guests begin creating value. If those clocks stay close together, the project can keep moving. If construction keeps demanding money while demand is delayed, every unfinished system becomes pressure. The problem is not simply that revenue is late. It is that the project may have committed to costs that cannot be paused without weakening confidence in everything already sold. This is the danger the world islands made visible. Much of the land had already been physically formed before the global financial crisis of 2008. Then Dubai's property market and government-related developers came under severe pressure. Development across much of the archipelago slowed or stalled. The sand did not vanish. The plan above it lost momentum. Some portions have since been developed or revived, so this is not a story about an entire project disappearing. It is a story about timing. The land arrived before the capital, infrastructure, access, and coordinated development needed to activate all of it. That is what a financial shock does to a long project. It does not need to destroy the engineering, it only needs to interrupt the sequence. A road delayed by a year affects every plot waiting behind it. A utility connection delayed by a year affects every building that depends on it. A buyer who withdraws affects more than one sale if the project was relying on continued demand to fund later stages. The island can be physically complete enough to survive and economically incomplete enough to wait. So why take that risk at all? Why not build the simplest possible shape, keep the roads short, keep the pipes short, reduce the exposed edge, and make the whole thing easier to protect? Why build a palm? A compact island would create plenty of dry land. It would also create a large interior. But the most valuable product in this kind of project is not the interior, it is waterfront frontage. Royal IHC describes Palm Jumeirah as roughly 700 hectares of reclaimed land that added approximately 72 kilometers of coastline. That is the economic effect of the shape. Imagine drawing a simple, compact island and tracing its outer boundary with a marker. Most of the new land sits behind that one perimeter. Now take the same basic footprint and divide it into long branches. The total area may still be limited, but the marker has to travel in and out along every side of every branch. The amount of land directly touching the water grows far faster than the amount of interior land. That is why the shape matters financially. It changes the mix of what is being created. The developer is accepting a harder road and utility layout in exchange for a larger share of plots that can be sold as waterfront rather than merely nearby. The trunk creates a shared connection to the mainland. The fronds extend outward. Each branch places more plots against the water. Instead of creating one outer edge around a compact block, the design folds the shoreline inward and outward again and again. A compact island creates more land away from the water, a branching island creates more land touching it, and a square meter attached to a private beach, an open water view, or direct waterfront access can command far more than a square meter buried in the middle of the same development. That is what the project is really manufacturing. Not sand, not raw acreage. Serviced access to the water. The sand creates the platform. The breakwater protects the relationship. The roads and utilities make the relationship usable. The legal system makes it transferable. The hotels, villas, apartments, and attractions convert that relationship into transactions. Now the palm shape stops looking decorative. The fronds multiply waterfront plots. The crescent protects them. The trunk connects them. The outline markets the development, but the underlying economic move is much simpler. Create more premium edge from a limited footprint. This is the payoff. It is also the trap. Every additional meter of waterfront can create more value. It can also require more road, more pipe, more cable, more landscaping, more inspection, more travel time, and more coastline to protect. A narrow branch can make a home feel private. It also pushes that home farther from the mainland connection. A longer shoreline can support more premium plots. It also gives the sea more edge to act on. So the winning design is not the one with the most dramatic outline. It is the one where the premium created by each additional piece of waterfront exceeds the permanent cost of servicing and defending it. Palm Jumeirah could support that calculation because it had something no dredger could manufacture. Dubai. The island dominates the photograph, but the city outside the frame supplies much of the value. Residents depend on roads leading into the wider urban network. Hotels depend on airports, airlines, events, workers, suppliers, restaurants, and a global visitor market. Property buyers depend on banks, brokers, legal systems, construction companies, and confidence that Dubai will remain a place where people want to live, visit, and hold property. The island contributes to the city's appeal. It does not create every customer by itself. Dubai reported 19.59 million international overnight visitors in 2025, with average hotel occupancy above 80%. Those are citywide figures, not Palm Jumeirah's private income statement. They do not prove that every hotel or every property on the island made money. They show the scale of the economic current feeding the shoreline. Luxury property activity tells the same story from the buyer side. Knight Frank reported that Palm Jumeirah recorded 127 residential transactions above $10 million in 2024, totaling nearly $2.3 billion. That does not reveal the original developer's lifetime profit. It does not mean every owner earned a return. It does show that buyers were willing to pay extraordinary amounts for property attached to this created waterfront, and that willingness to pay is what turns engineering into economics. The sand cannot repay the dredging fleet. The breakwater does not generate cash by absorbing waves. A substation does not become profitable because it looks impressive. The money comes from people valuing what those systems make possible. Buyers want the address. Guests want the hotel. Businesses want the traffic. Residents accept the cost of access and maintenance because they value the location, which means the island's most important dependency is not on the island at all. It is on continued confidence in the city around it. Property markets can weaken. Credit can tighten. tourism can fall, construction costs can rise. International demand can shift. The island cannot react quickly because the expensive decisions are already sitting in the sea. That is where Palm Jumeirah and the world separate most clearly. Palm Jumeirah has a central trunk connected to the mainland. Roads, utilities, construction traffic, emergency services, workers' deliveries, and visitors can move through a shared spine. The world is fragmented into hundreds of separate islands. Access depends more heavily on boats. Infrastructure and development can become more individualized. Each island may wait on its own owner, financing, transport arrangement, construction plan, and utility solution. One connected road can serve many plots. One isolated island may need its own answer. That difference changes how success spreads. On Palm Jumeirah, a working road, utility corridor, hotel, attraction, or cluster of occupied homes can support activity around it. The district can build network effects because people and services move through shared systems. On a fragmented archipelago, one active island does not automatically solve the access or utility problem of the island beside it. Development can happen in pieces without creating one functioning district. The financial crisis exposed that weakness, but it did not create every part of it. It interrupted a project whose parcels were already harder to connect and coordinate. That is why the same city could support two very different outcomes from reclaimed land. Palm Jumeirah created shoreline into a connected urban district. Large parts of the world spent years as valuable-looking land waiting for the systems that make value usable. This is also why the most misleading sign of success is the complete outline. A satellite image can prove that the dredging worked. It cannot prove that the roads work, that the utilities are live, that the buildings are occupied, that the hotels fill, that buyers complete their payments, or that maintenance remains affordable. The image shows what was placed. The economy depends on what keeps moving. Electricity has to cross from the city. Waste has to leave, workers have to arrive, food, parts, furniture, and supplies have to reach the properties. Guests have to keep booking, buyers have to keep believing, maintenance crews have to keep protecting the shoreline and the systems beneath the streets. Stop enough of those flows and the island does not disappear, it becomes expensive land waiting for them to return. So does building an artificial island make economic sense? Yes, under a very specific set of conditions. The site has to be legally controlled. The ground and marine conditions have to be manageable. The platform has to be built and protected at a cost the final uses can support. Roads and utilities have to arrive before buyers and lenders lose confidence. The shape has to create genuinely valuable uses rather than empty spectacle. Financing has to survive the period when the project is visible but not yet productive. And the surrounding city has to keep supplying demand, workers, services, access, and capital. Palm Jumeirah became an active and highly valued district because those systems came together strongly enough, created coastline mainland access, shared infrastructure, tourism demand, residences, hotels, and a premium property market. Public information does not provide one clean project-level calculation proving a final lifetime return. So the honest conclusion is not that every dirham can be followed neatly from dredger to profit. The defensible conclusion is more useful than that. Palm Jumeirah worked because it did not merely create land. It created connected, protected, serviced waterfront inside a city capable of making that waterfront valuable. The world shows the other side. The physical platform can remain in place while the economic system above it waits years for capital, access, coordination, and demand. At the beginning, the fantasy was that you could draw a line across open water and own everything inside it. But the line is not what makes the island valuable. What matters is whether enough people, power, water, traffic, confidence, and money can keep crossing that line for long enough to make the land on the other side worth defending.